and that was the payment for $1,200. There were certain criteria that had to be met in order to be eligible for the first economic impact payment, which the criteria was you would have had to have a posted tax year 2019 return, or if you didn't have a 2019 return, a 2018 if the 2019 tax return was not filed. And so after researching your account, I do see that you did not have a 2018 or a 2019 tax return filed, and so that's why you was not eligible for the first economic impact payment.
Okay, so those I understand that the 2018 or the 2019 tax returns were used to determine the income level. Now, in my case, I was not required to file a tax return for those years because my income is way below the limit of what is required to file a tax return. So the so I do agree with you that I did not file a return for those years, and the reason being is because I did not even meet the threshold in order for me to file the return. But if we go back to the core requirements of the stimulus payment, the fact is my income was below, I think it was $75,000. It was below the threshold. So I am eligible for it because my income is within the guidelines.
Right, and so the next thing that would have made you eligible if you were on Social Security, those benefits or SSI, you would have qualified, but those were the qualifications for the taxpayer to be eligible for the economic impact payment.
Yes, so I think we have a slight disconnect. We are talking about the existence of we're talking about the way to verify my eligibility is using the 2018 or the 2019 tax return. That's one of the ways that the IRS determined who was eligible, and to the extent that some people receive I think on one of your communication, it could very well be that some people receive payments that they wouldn't have been eligible for if they use a different year, and I think the IRS waive any refunds. But in my case, but when we were talking about what is required to receive the payment, it's not the filing of a return, it's having an income that is below a certain threshold. And in my case, my income was below that threshold. And if I may, I think last December, I think towards the end of the year, there was a program in place for those non-filers. They could have gone through a process to apply for the credit as opposed to claiming it on their tax return. So I am sure that I am not the only person that didn't file a return because they were not required. But as far as eligibility is concerned, I am still eligible.
Right, so if you did not do the non-filers to state that you did not have to file a tax return, and you didn't do that program, which is now voided, they are not accepting that any longer, then it's still a non-qualification. I'm reading you the guidelines on what was acceptable to be eligible for the
No,
economic impact payment.
ma'am, I do not want to argue, but I too read the guidelines. That is the reason why we are given the option to claim it as a credit on the tax return. This is the last resort. If I filed a return and you were able to verify my income, I would have received it back in September with like everybody else. I also had the option to apply through the non-filers, and lastly, the third option was to claim it as a credit, which I am doing. And if I read those guidelines so many times, and they are very clear, I am still eligible because my income was below the threshold. The fact that I did not file a
Right, but
return
it was
is irrelevant.
right, but it was also certain things also to qualify for the economic impact payment, and so that was if you did not receive it to claim it as a recovery rebate credit, but the non-filer return is not on file, or a 2018 nor a 2019 tax return was on file for you for those tax years, as well as on the second economic impact payment, it was based solely upon a 2019 tax return only.
So, ma'am, okay, now I think, I thank you so much for taking your time, because you are the first person who can actually give me some substantive answers, even though we are not seeing eye to eye. I am looking at the guidelines. This is the recovery rebate credit guidelines that is directly from the IRS, and the criteria, it's very clear. It's whether I had a social security, whether my social security was valid for employment, which it is, and whether I could be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. I cannot. And whether my income was within the threshold. It is. There is absolutely no requirement about having being a filer, because the rebate specifically was designed for people like myself, that in our income is so low that we're not even required to file a tax return. The fact that what you're telling me is not consistent with what is on the website. It's not even consistent with the spirit of the stimulus payment to begin with. That's the reason why, like I said before, we have the non-filer program. We also have the rebate credit. We are really having a disconnect, because I'm literally reading the guidelines published on your website.
Right, and I am as well, and that's why I can't provide you anything other than what I have on my end, and so I'm just providing you the guidelines from what I have on my end, and I'm providing you the information. So the only thing that I can advise on, I just have to go by what's located, in our system, and what we have to follow for the eligibility, as well as the limitations for that. And like I stated once before, for the first economic impact payment, it states that a posted tax year 2019 return or 2018 return is not filed. If a non-filer, if you did not do the non-filer, to state that you're one of those qualifying people that did not have to file. So we would have had to have that or Social Security to be eligible for the economic impact payment, and that was for economic impact payment 1.
So,
for the second economic payment,
sorry, ma'am, excuse me. Just to confirm, you said that I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of your answer correctly. You said that I needed to have file. I needed to have file as a non-filer and to have a valid social security. Are you saying that?
No, if you would, if you had, if one of the qualifications, if you would have had Social Security benefits or SSI benefits or a 2018, 2019 tax return on file. If you were one of the people who did not need to file a tax return, that's why they had the non-filer option available for the taxpayers to go in to state that they did not have to file. They did not meet requirements to file a tax return.
Yes. Okay. So my question is that, like I said, the rebate process was designed for people like myself, we were not eligible. And I understand that you are reading what is published on your instruction, and I'm also going by what is published on your website. It states that, in order for me to be eligible, I shouldn't have received a rebate. That's obvious, and I didn't. And he also stated that my social security number is to be valid, which it is, and I should not be claimed as a dependent on someone else's tax return. I am not, and that my income is below $75,000, which it is. There is absolutely no reference that if a non-filer did not claim to be as a non-filer, they would not be eligible, for the economic impact payment. Because he says that in order for me to be eligible to claim, you may be able to claim the recovery rebate if you were eligible but were not issued in EIP 1, EIP 2, or neither, and your EIP 1 was less than the required amount. Like I said, I really like your website because the instructions are very clear, and I am really within the guidelines. There is absolutely nowhere it states that a non-filer needed to have filed their status as a non-filer in order for them to be eligible to apply for the credit.
One moment.